I've been talking about the crucifixion a lot, and a question that often comes up is a question about icons. And somebody had asked this, what about the symbol of the empty cross? And in fact, doesn't God himself say in the Old Testament that you shall have no graven images? And what does this mean? And how is it that this is not violating God's commandment? Well, it's a good question. The response is that images are not idols. If they were, then God broke his own commandment right after he gave it. Because he told Moses to go make images of the angels and put them on the Ark of the Covenant. But even more to the point, St. Paul tells us that Jesus is the image of the invisible God. God, who is pure spirit, invisible, takes on an image. He becomes an image. God becomes man. This is what Jesus is. So, our view of icons, that is, displaying Christ, and then later the saints, the holy ones, displaying Christ, our view of whether or not this is okay is based on our view of the incarnation. So, the understanding that icons are doing something good is a reflection of what God has done. God has revealed himself to us through a physical way. God made us with a body and a soul, a physical part and a spiritual part, visible and invisible. And so he's staying true to the way he made us. He's redeeming us through physicality. Invisible God takes on human nature. And with that human nature, offers up a sacrifice that saves us. So God, somebody once said, God likes matter. He created it. Right? So we go back to creation. Everything there comes from God. And then he uses creation to redeem us. And he stays consistent with this, and this is what the sacraments are. The fact that baptism does something in our lives. The Eucharist. These are physical, spiritual things. These are things that God uses to give us grace, to give us his life, to give us his love. So when we use icons, we're not worshiping the actual image that's before us, but we're worshiping the image of the one who is portrayed. So think about a picture, maybe of somebody you have in your wallet. I feel like people don't really have pictures in their wallets anymore, maybe on your cell phone. Or a picture of grandma, or something like that. Any picture you have, you don't actually think that that picture is a person. But that picture is an image. It warms your heart and makes you think of the person. And so, pictures are like modern day icons or statues. Icon is, if you're not familiar with that word, usually a depiction of Christ or one of the saints in a particular way. Almost, I don't know if genre is the right word, but it's not a particular type of painting, a particular type of art. It's something that's holy, that's reflecting, it's teaching about us. So, I wanted to hit on that. And then, the last thing that I want to say, just to give you a hint, I talked a little bit about the Eucharist. But, the night before Jesus dies, we have the Last Supper. So just to give you a few things on this, that Christ institutes a new priesthood. We talked about the priesthood in the Old Testament, and then Jesus is the ultimate high priest, but he also institutes a new priesthood. What's the purpose of a priest? Somebody who offers a sacrifice. And what's the sacrifice of the new covenant? Christ himself. So how is it that the priests of the new covenant offer Christ himself? Good question. When Jesus is dying on the cross, he cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Now, there's certainly a lot of meaning here, but one of the most important meanings is that if we take a step back and look at what's going on in the scene. Jesus is being mocked. He's being made fun of. Back in the Old Testament, there was a certain type of sacrifice called the Todah, which I've been talking about, the thank offering. And the way the thank offering worked was, if you were in a difficult situation, you cried out to God, and then you went and you offered bread and wine with your family, and you thanked God for the deliverance that would come. And several of these Todah prayers are in the Psalms, the book of Psalms. They're called Todah Psalms. And one of these is Psalm 22. It starts off with the person crying out to God for help, and then it goes through the different things, and then it ends with, thank you, God. Thank you for your deliverance. So, Jesus is being mocked, and what does he say in response to the people? He says, Psalm 22. How does he say that? Well, the references, the chapters and the verses, were added much, much, much later. In Jesus' time, there weren't chapters. If you wanted to quote a book, you said the first line. What is the first line of Psalm 22? My God, why have you forsaken me? Jesus is saying, God will deliver me, and he's making himself known as the Todah, the thank offering. He is the thank offering. How else do we know this? In a lot of ways. Go back to the night before Jesus dies. Celebrating the Passover meal. He takes bread, and he says, this is my body offered for you. When was his body offered? On the cross. So he said, this is that. What I'm offering you, or this bread is what is my body on the cross. He's showing the connection. In a mysterious way, the meal that he's celebrating is connected with his very death. Same thing with the wine, the cup. He says, takes the cup of wine, says, this is my blood poured out for you. When was this blood poured out? On the cross. And this has particular significance in the language. Poured out was sacrificial language, because the blood would be poured out on the altars. So Jesus institutes a new covenant and a new sacrifice to that covenant. And then he tells the priest something very important. He says, do this in remembrance of me. Do this. This thing that I just did, this meal that I just celebrated with you, I want you to do it. I'm giving you the ability to do it. And this is his way of setting them up to continue this sacrifice for us. Now, how does he continue sacrifice? Jesus died once, right? Did Jesus die over and over again? No. How can this be? Well, I'm going to jump back up on the outline, on the time, the hour. In the Gospel of John, we have something pretty neat. He talks about the hour. And through his Gospel, Jesus keeps saying, my hour hasn't come, my hour hasn't come, my hour hasn't come. And then all of a sudden, right when we get to about Jesus' death, he says, now my hour has come. My hour is here. So, the time is very important. See, we're on a, it's kind of obvious. Here's creation, and here's the end of the world, and we can look back, we can think about the future, and so forth. But God is outside of time. God is always now. He's already at the beginning of the world, he's at the end of the world. This whole line exists in the still point in time of God. And so we have different words for time. We lose this in English, but kairos is God's time, and chronos is our time. And so, when God, who exists outside of time, comes into time, we have something rather remarkable. Jesus dies for us, and he makes it so that we can step outside of time. So this still point expands out to everybody. And now, when we enter into the sacred meal which he instituted, whether it's here, we can go back to the foot of the cross. So when we celebrate the Eucharist, we go back mysteriously, we're sucked outside of time, and we are there at Jesus' sacrifice. Okay, I think I'm going to end there. Let's go ahead and break, and then we'll